Hi, folks. I'm slowly getting better. I just want to show a show I went on Mohammed Hijab show, and I want to just go over it with you. Um, so we'll just share a little bit.
Christians, attacking the elderly, attacking the young. This completely
You said
So he's on this show with the Mohammed Hijab and his friend are talking to this Christian guy. So we'll listen to that for a minute.
you said
This is a
you're
complete
laughing.
red herring.
Listen,
No
you're
one cares about
laughing.
demons, right?
Nobody
this is
cares about
irrelevant.
demons.
When you were pretending like you could logically justify Christianity, we were doing that cosplay. It was going well. Now you brought in the demons.
So you believe?
It's too
You
early
see,
for
that's
that.
the problem. That's the problem with Islam and Christianity. We are far away from each other in terms of spirituality.
Okay, so let's go back to something that I said to you earlier. Do you believe your belief in God should be rational?
Yes.
Okay, good. As a Muslim, I do too. Fine. Our common base, me and you, our common base, Jodash, is logic. That's something that we can both agree about, correct?
Fair enough.
Fine. Is it logical to believe that there is one Almighty God who is independent and perfect, or does it make sense that there are three beings that you describe as one being in a relationship of the Trinity, in which the Father is co-eternal and coexists alongside these other essences, and the Father did not come before the Son? Everything existed eternally.
So he's strawmanning the Christian position there. He's not actually stating what the Christian, but he's talking about logic. Not forget about the Bible. Let's go to logic. That's what he's saying. Okay. So then I came on here
to speak to us, and we are going to give a link for whoever wants to join this live stream so they can actually speak to us. So many people out there looking for the truth. And what do we need to do? Oh yeah, that's good. That's good. So this is the good. Oh man.
Hi folks, are you okay? Can we get on with the discussion? It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, how are you doing today?
I'm okay, bro. Listen to what you were saying, because you were talking about
Why did you do that?
And because you were talking about logic, what is the role of logic in classical Islam? Because there are issues in classical Islam with the different groups where there were issues where you cannot use logic to peer into various aspects of Allah. So, for example, the debate and discussion in past Islamic thought, where some said Allah had hands and feet, some said he doesn't, some said it was metaphorical. And there were some groups that said, listen, you can't use logic here. You can't start peering into Allah like this. So I would say that your argument was a bit disingenuous, because you're using logic to peer into the Christian aspect of the Trinity, but yet you won't use logic to peer into various aspects of Allah in your classical discussions.
Yeah, I would say you've actually misframed the entire discussion there, because what we were speaking about is the incoherency of the Trinity. And
it wasn't misframing. When he started, he talked about the role of logic. Forget revelation, he said, we'll go with logic. So it was about, first of all, the foundation is logic. And then he goes on about the incoherence. But he's saying that we go with logic. What I'm trying to do is show him that in classical Islam, they were with this book here. And also you can read Yasser Qadhi. Thanks, bro. Yasser Qadhi, also a book by Yasser Qadhi the Science of Quran, and this book is the four major imams of the early Islam all saying you're to do theology first and foremost using the creed, using the Quran and the Sunnah, and they did not want to base their theology on any philosophical thinking. They wanted to base the theology on the Quran and the Sunnah. So I was just trying to show him, and this is also not in this book also, but Yasser Qadhi's Science of Quran, first 100 pages. So like there was a debate, one of the big debates in Islam, it took two big debates. One debate, thank you, bro, I really appreciate that. Thank you, I really, really appreciate that. So the big debate was one of the big debate, well, three debates. First debate was in the Quran, it says Allah has hands and feet. So there was a debate of, does Allah have literal hands and feet? Is it metaphorical? And the classical scholars were saying, look, you can't use logic to peer into this. This is beyond logic. It's a mystery, right? Let's just keep to the Sunnah. Let's keep to the Hadith. Let's keep to the Quran. Second debate. Some people said, scholars said, the Quran is eternal, an eternal tablet, and is an attribute of Allah. And some said that the Quran, it was created and it's not an attribute of Allah. And again, some people were trying to focus on, well, what does the Quran say? Forget about philosophy here. The third debate was about the actual attributes. Are the attribute, how does Allah have attributes? And there aren't many gods within Allah. If there's attribute of love, attribute of this, attribute of that, that's like within Allah, that means there are other gods. So they debated that. And classical scholars were saying, look, we need to just follow what the Bible says. Follow what the Quran says and the Hadith. So what I was trying to show this guy is that there was a kind of demarcation of logic saying that there are mysteries in the nature of the Godhead. And that's all I wanted to show, is that the Muslim scholars said there were mysteries in the Godhead and that logic has its place, but it cannot peer into these mysteries. And this man did not engage with me. He kind of wasn't listening to what I was saying. He thought he knew what he was talking about, and we'll go into, but this is where I was wanting to go, but I didn't get to this. So we'll continue with him. So I wasn't just bringing up this book. I had Yasser Qadhi's Science of Quran and things like that. So,
and the coherency of the Tawheed from a logical perspective, you cannot compare that.
So we'll
live
start
stream.
again.
So what are you doing today?
I'm okay, bro. Listen to what you were saying, because you were talking about
Why did you do that?
and because you were talking about logic. What is the role of logic in classical Islam? Because there are issues in classical Islam with the different groups where there were issues where you cannot use logic to peer into various aspects of Allah. So, for example, the debate and discussion in past Islamic thought, where some said Allah had hands and feet, some said he doesn't, some said it was metaphorical. And there were some groups that said, listen, you can't use logic here. You can't start peering into Allah like this. So I would say that your argument was a bit disingenuous, because you're using logic to peer into the Christian aspect of the Trinity, but yet you won't use logic to peer into various aspects of Allah in your classical discussions.
Yeah, I would say you've actually misframed the entire discussion there, because what we were speaking about is the incoherency of the Trinity and the coherency of the Tawheed from a logical perspective.
From a logical perspective, the whole foundation of what he's saying is, he said categorically, forget the Bible. I don't believe in the Bible. We're going to go with logic. So his whole argument about the Trinity and Tawheed, he's saying it's rooted in logic. Let's deal with logic, not what the Bible says. But my point, what I never got a chance to tell, which I've just stated before, is in classical Islam, it was a major emphasis on no. First of all, we use revelation, we use the Quran, and we use the Hadith. And there are these issues: the eternal Quran, Allah has hands and feet, the attributes of Allah are, how does that work? And so Tawheed is much more complex than he's actually really understanding here. And he's not really engaging with me. He thinks he knows what he's talking about, but he obviously doesn't have a grasp of the intricate debates that were going on at that time, and what some groups were saying about stand on revelation. And I was going to hold him to account on these issues concerning the limitations of logic. I wasn't saying logic is not important, but I was going to show that there are limitations to logic, but I never got the chance.
You can
Limitations when it comes to the nature of God, because we're talking about analogical language where God has come down to our level. And so logic is in the context of analogical language. And I never got a chance to say these things.
not compare that. It's a disanalogy to compare that to the intra-Muslim discussion about God's attributes. Because when it comes to, say, the Asha'ira, the Atharis, the Maturidis, there is
these intra discussions about the attributes, if not careful, would undermine Tawheed. So they had to discuss these things, and the way some dealt with it was philosophical. Some dealt with it by just standing on what the Quran and the Hadith stated. So he's not really being honest of the complexity of Tawheed, the oneness of God. And so when he says, I'm just discussing to you with the oneness of God and the Trinity, well, wait a minute, you've got issues where the Quran is eternal and is an attribute of Allah, and that the classical scholars discussed this, and some said, let's just follow the Quran and just leave it at that. And some said, no, let's be philosophical, this is metaphorical. So some scholars were saying, no, we stand on revelation first, this is a mystery. And he's not being honest about these discussions. So it's not as simple as comparing Tawheed and Trinity as if it's a clear slam dunk issue of the oneness of God and the Trinity, 3 in 1. There were these complex discussions that implied that there's more to the oneness of God in Islam. And to get round those issues, they had to use the word mystery. So he's just ignoring all this scholarship. He's ignoring all this. And he just wants this simplistic argument. We believe in Tawheed. You believe in Trinity. Yours is illogical. We're using logic. But wait a minute. Your classical scholars said when it comes to when it comes to the Quran being eternal and an attribute of Allah, when Allah has hands and feet, when we come to these discussions about the attributes, does it mean that there's more that it means if we say the attributes are defined individually, that means there are many gods within. So how do we work that out? And they tried to solve that issue and things like that. It's far more complex than he's actually saying.
Is a common denominator in which they affirm main tenets of belief that allow them to say that we believe in a unity of God.
This is not true. When he says a common denominator, there was not a common denominator in saying they believed in the unity of God, because they had questions about what do we mean about unity? How is God a unity when the Quran is eternal and it's an attribute of Allah? So he's completely not honest about what he's talking about.
That unity of God, there is no disagreement about. Now, when it comes to the attributes of God in the intra-Muslim discussion, that is something in which one group cannot say to the other that you have now denied the unity of God. We're actually having an intra-discussion about the attributes. So it's a complete disanalogy. And what I would say is, the last person who came on board, he was trying to nuke the discussion in terms of trying to challenge logic by bringing in demons, and you're trying to do it by bringing in disanalogies. But it's basically the same thing. It's basically okay, we as Christians cannot justify our belief using logic. So what we're going to do is we're going to attack logic instead. So I would say to you, in a very simple way, I'm going to put the same question to you. How is it possible for there to be a finite dependent being like Jesus and a being like God who is completely independent and completely free of all need? These two natures are logically incoherent when you put them together. It's incompatible, rather. You cannot have them together. Do you agree with that at least?
I've heard what you said. I think you're strawmanning the Christian position. You don't really understand the Christian position. And I would also say that you don't understand your own classical scholarship, like books like this, because it's not as simple as saying Talmud.
What book is that?
Let me finish, please. Right. So he's strawmanning the Christian position. You know, he's talking about God is finite because it's Jesus. He talks later on about God, earlier on about God died. How can God die? It's strawmanning the Christian position. Christian position is two natures in one person. It's a mystery. And so that's the Christian position. So when you start putting tags like that, you're strawmanning the Christian position, right? What I'm alluding to is this, is that when we're talking about God, we are using analogical language. I'm using John Cornelius Van Til here, if anybody wants to do research. We're using analogical language, meaning language that God is using so we can understand God. But God has given us a revelation, and logic is not higher than the revelation. The revelation is explaining who God is, and logic is a handmaiden, but it can't fully understand God because it's analogical language. It's language coming down to our level. We can't grasp the fullness of who God is. Now, this idea is also in classical Islam. In classical Islam, they also had this idea. They had the idea that, wait a minute, there are some serious problems here. If we say the Quran is eternal and it's an attribute of Allah, that is two gods. And so some would say, this is language that we can't understand. It's a mystery. Some would try to answer it philosophically, but some would say this is a mystery. When the Quran says Allah has hands and feet, some scholars said this is a mystery because they understood that language cannot fully grasp who God is. And so I'm not saying that we can't use logic. What I'm saying, what I wanted to say, which I never got to say, is that logic is a tool made of revelation. It is not over revelation, but under revelation. And that when God reveals himself in revelation, there are some things that reason cannot fully grasp because it's analogical language coming down to our level, but we can't fully grasp it. And that's what you can see in classical Islam. Now, I never got a chance to say these things, and I'm saying it not just based on this book, but I'm saying it based on Yasser Qadhi's book, The Sciences of Quran. And I've studied it well, and I know what I'm talking about. But he wasn't engaging with me on the topic. He wasn't listening to me. Please, I've listened to you, brother. It's not simple. You're making it out that it's Tawhid against the Trinity in classical Islam.
No, but can you lift up that book? I want to see the book.
So notice he stopped my point. I was getting into my point. I was going to make a major point, and he's interrupted me. He didn't listen. I listened to him. He didn't listen to me.
Okay. What is that book?
This book is about your classical scholars like Malik and various others about the role of the creed and the role of philosophy within the creed.
Who's the author of the book and what's the name of the book? What is this?
It's the creed, the four imams, and it's a collection of what's interesting. This is a standard work, and he doesn't know this standard work. This is a standard work among Sunni Muslims. It's a standard work, and he doesn't know who it is. It's printed by, it's translated by Mays Qureshi, edited and revisited by Musa Richardson, and it's about Imam Abu, I my glasses. It's about Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam al-Shafi, Imam al-Hamad.
Okay, I think you're very confused about this because the last time that you spoke about the different creedal schools. This book is about the 4 schools of Islam in terms of fiqh. This is 2 different things. So, for example, someone could be Hanafi and Athari, or they could be Hanafi and Ashari, right? You're totally confused. You first were talking about theological differences, and now you picked up a book about differences in fiqh. Do you understand that this is a very thick thing to do?
So that is a very extremely disrespectful thing he's just said there. Extremely disrespectful. He didn't know the book. He's not read the book. The book is clearly stating. I'll read. I'll read a couple of quotes from the book. So, yeah. I used to study rhetoric to the extent. This is one of these imams. I used to study rhetoric to the extent that I became highly skilled in it, even reference point that people refer to, and we used to sit close to the circle of Ahmad B. Salem. Once a woman came to me and said, if a man has a wife who is a slave and wishes to divorce her according to the Sunnah, how should he do it? And I did not know what to say. So I commanded her to ask Haman and to return and inform me of his answer. So she asked Haman, and he answered was, he pronounces divorce on her one time, and when she is not menstruating, and he has not had intercourse with her since at least before her last. Then he leaves her until she has gone through 2 menstrual cycles. Once she had bathed after that, then she is allowed to marry another man. When she told me this, I said, I have no need for rhetoric. I took my shoes and sat under Hamad. So these scholars are saying we need to study the Quran and the Hadith first. Forget the philosophical mumbo jumbo. So I've given you a quote here. This is Imam Abu Hanif, the forbiddance of rhetoric and argumentation in the religion. Okay, so yeah, so we'll go on. So I'm correcting what I'm saying, and I've just given you a quote from the book. He's not read the book. So this idea that, oh, I'm talking to Christians about Tawhid and about Trinity, and it's logically incoherent about the Trinity, and you say, well, let's look at the Bible. And then he says, no, we're not looking at the Bible. I don't believe in the Bible. We're going to stand on logic. And then I call out him and say, well, wait a minute. You're saying logic and the Trinity is not logical, but yet you won't use logic when it comes to Allah, because there are issues in your so-called Tawhid where the Quran is eternal, and there's an attribute of Allah where Allah has hands and feet, and where the attributes, are they independent or dependent, which means that there could be more than one God within the Godhead, and all those issues. You don't use logic there. The scholars like this guy, they just go to the Quran and the Sunnah and just say it's a mystery. Your classical scholars. So it's not as simple as Tawhid and Trinity and we're all going to use logic, because logic ultimately is not higher than revelation. And that's even in your classical Islam. Revelation is higher than logic. And revelation is analogical. It's language that God is using for us to understand him. And logic sometimes cannot fully grasp that language. And that is even in ancient Islam, in their scholars, on the discussions. So he has pivoted away from this as if I don't know what I'm talking about. And if you notice, he didn't deal with any specific issue I mentioned about Allah has hands and feet. I mentioned that. He doesn't go into that. He just skips everything because he knows it will contradict what he's saying. Right. Can you clarify?
Do you understand what's going on?
Can you clarify for me then? Could you really clarify for me? Is it true or not that you had classical scholars that were against philosophy concerning the creed? Wait a minute. Can you clarify? Can you clarify that these classical scholars said that if you're going to do theology, that it has to be rooted in revelation, it has to be rooted in the Quran, and it has to be rooted in the hadith. Could you clarify this for me?
Okay, good. So let me clarify something for you.
Listen.
In Islam, we have a place for reason and revelation. We do not have this idea that you cannot reason, you cannot think, you cannot philosophize. This does not exist. For example, when we have the great Imam Ghazali writing.
He's not clarified it. I asked him specifically about the foundation, right? The foundation. The foundation of your theology has to be the Quran and the Hadith. It starts with that first, not with the role of philosophy. That has to be your foundation. I asked him for clarification, and he pivots and says, no, we have a role for revelation and reason. That's not what I asked him. I asked him specifically. Let's go again. Can you clarify?
Do you understand what's going on?
Can you clarify for me then? Could you really clarify for me? Is it true or not that you had classical scholars that were against philosophy concerning the creed? Wait a minute. Can you clarify? Wait a minute. Can you hear? Did you hear? Concerning the creed. I said concerning the creed. Clarify that these classical scholars said that if you're going to do theology, that it has to be rooted in revelation, it has to be rooted in the Quran, and it has to be rooted in the hadith. Could you clarify this for me?
Okay, good. So let me clarify something.
So let me see if he clarifies. Does he deal with the issue of you do theology, i.e. the creed has to be rooted in the hadith and the Quran? That's what I asked him. And the theology is rooted in the hadith and the Quran. It has to be rooted. It has to be the foundation. That's what I'm asking for clarification, and specifically in the area of creed. So let's see what he says.
For you. In Islam, we have a place for reason and revelation. We do not have this idea that you cannot reason, you cannot think, you cannot philosophize. This does not exist. For example,
I didn't ask that. I'm asking, when you do the creed, are you using logic first or revelation? Are you using logic or the Quran and Hadith first as your foundation? Because the creeds are based on the Quran and the Hadith. They're not based on philosophy. I know there was a role of philosophy with debates and discussions, but that's not what I'm dealing with. I'm showing him and trying to show people that when he said we don't use the Bible, we use logic. When we go to his classical scholarship, when we go to his creeds, those creeds are based on the Quran and the Hadith. So he's contradicting himself. So he's not dealing with my question.
When we have the great Imam Ghazali writing about the incoherence of the philosophers, it doesn't mean that he is saying
my scholars are earlier and more important than Ghazi. That scholar's later.
It's incoherent to be rational. It's incoherent to think. It's incoherent to use your mind. He was arguing against a particular group of people who held views that he deemed to be heretical. And he actually proved that these people had heretical views. He himself, if you look at his writings, if you look at his justification, if you look at the way that he was using logical arguments, he is using today what we would classify as a type of philosophy. So the problem in terms of what you're saying is,
so it's pivoted away to a particular scholar, but it's not dealt with the classical scholar. These are the classic. These are the foundational scholars. He's gone to some philosophical guy. These are the foundational scholars. And my point is that these creeds that they have, the Sunni Islam, the creeds, they're rooted not in philosophy. They're rooted in, I read the quote to you, they're rooted in the Hadith and the Quran. And so my point, which I didn't get to state, is that in Islam, when it came to theology, the classical Islam, way before this other scholar that he mentioned, in classical Islam, there were a number of classical scholars, i.e. these ones, that said when you're doing the creed, it's got to be rooted in the Quran and the Hadith. and they were suspicious of using philosophical mumbo jumbo. And when they had debates on the issue of does Allah have hands and feet and the Quran is eternal, some of them were saying it's all a mystery. So when he comes and says we're not using the Bible, when his early scholars used the Quran, when he says let's look at it logically and yours is illogical, the Trinity, why do you get to say that about the Trinity when there are issues like the Quran is eternal and an attribute of Allah? We can't point that out, that your Tawhid is not Tawhid here, because your classical scholars turned around and said it was a mystery. Some, not all, but some. So using double standards and simplistic arguments, strawmanning the Christian position.
You're assuming that the people who tried to rationalize aspects of God's nature which are beyond comprehension, and those people came...
I got him. When he said that, I got him. Someone clip it. I got him. Beyond comprehension. He's done. I got him there. When he said that, he's admitting there are things with the Tawhid that are beyond comprehension. But yet he's saying we can use logic to take down the Trinity. And if we say it's a mystery, he'll say, no, it's illogical. But yet he's got issues that there are things that are beyond comprehension. But we can't turn around to him and say that's illogical, because he'll say, no, it's beyond comprehension. So I got him. I got him banged to rights when he said that. And you can see that I saw that.
Incoherent to use your mind. He was arguing against a particular group of people who held views that he deemed to be heretical. And he actually proved that these people had heretical views. He himself, if you look at his writings, if you look at his justification, if you look at the way that he was using logical arguments, he is using today what we would classify as a type of philosophy. So the problem in terms of what you're saying is you're assuming that the people who tried to rationalize aspects of God's nature which are beyond comprehension, and those people came up with heresies, that's the same.
I lifted my hand because I got him.
Okay, good. So let me clarify something for you. In Islami writing about aspects of God's nature which are beyond comprehension, and those people came up with heresies, that's the same as the scholars of Islam warning against people to use their reason and their rationale and to think clearly about things, to think about epistemology and ontology and metaphysics and these types of things. That's not true at all. In Islam, you have a very clear case throughout the centuries of Islam that we champion reason, we champion critical thinking, and we champion philosophical thought when it comes from the perspective of talking about metaphysics and causality and epistemology and all these types of things. Why is it that in every century of Islam, we have Muslim scholars speaking about this? So this is, again, one of those disingenuous Christian tactics in which they try and use a intra-Muslim discussion, and then they try and twist it to make it look like Islam is against logic. And they all do it when Muslims are using logic to challenge the Trinity.
Right.
It's no way gonna go towards helping you to formulate an argument for the truthfulness of the Trinity by attacking logic itself. Because look, if you're gonna attack logic itself, then from a contradiction, I want you to understand a philosophical point. From a contradiction, anything follows. So if you're going to attack logic and you're going to say, look, we cannot trust logic, which is what the previous guy tried to do, which is what you were trying to allude to earlier, from that point onwards, nothing else follows.
Right. First of all, you need to engage with me. So they took me off there. He didn't engage with me, right? I never said you can't use logic. And I quite understand that in the history of Islam, they were using logic and philosophy and in epistemology and the debating for Tawhid. So I was going to say to him, I grant you all that. I agree with all that, but you've not dealt with my issue. You've completely not dealt with what I'm saying. I never said we can't use philosophy. We can't use logic. You're not willing to listen to me and engage with me. That's what I would have said. I said, is it? I would have said, again, could you clarify to me in your classical Islam, when you are writing a creed, is it rooted first and foremost in the Quran and the Hadith? That's the first question again I would have asked him. Secondly, can you clarify, is it true or not that some classical scholars would say that Allah has hands and feet are a mystery, that the attributes of Allah are a mystery, that the eternal Quran is an attribute of Allah, is a mystery? Could you clarify, is that the case or not? Because I grant you all that you've said, but you've not dealt with what I'm actually dealing with. You're not even engaging with me or understanding where I'm coming from. You don't even understand theologically where I'm coming from. I'm coming from a Cornelius Van Til apologetic here. So you're not even aware of where I'm coming from and engaging with you. You're not intellectually engaged. And the fact that I came on and he said I'm thick, the fact that they took me off shows you how disrespectful and disingenuous these guys are. So in top and bottom of it, why have I done this video? Because this man said, we're not using the Bible. I don't believe the Bible. We're going to use logic. And then he started attacking the brother about the Trinity is not logical. And the first thing I wanted to point out to him, which I did get to say, that he's straw man in the Christian position. He doesn't understand it. The second thing is he doesn't understand his classical scholarship, which he didn't. He went off on a tangent about the Muslims had this philosophical tradition in every century. Granted, don't disagree, 100% agree with you. I can with what I'm actually talking about. You're completely on a different plane to what I'm actually alluding to. He talked about, I don't believe in logic and we can't use logic. I never said that. I'm not saying that because you're not engaging with me. I didn't get a chance to actually give my position, which would have been a Van Tillian position about analogical language, which also goes back to Herman Bavinck and Reformed systematic theology. I never got a chance to talk about that. I never got a chance to talk about Yasser Qadhi, Science of Quran, and the history of the debates of the nature of Tawhid, that it was far more complex than he's actually saying. What I wanted to say is revelation is higher than reason. Even in Islam, that is the case. We can see that, and he actually admitted in the beginning, in the middle, that there are things that you cannot comprehend about Allah. So he actually admitted it without realizing it. And that's all I wanted to get him to see, is that you're trying to use logic to attack the Christian faith, but there are mysteries on the issue of the Trinity because it's analogical language, which would have gone into. You're not holding yourself to that same standard and being consistent with that same standard, because you come to parts of Allah and say it's a mystery. And you won't allow logic to come into those mysteries. So logic has limitations. It cannot fully grasp the nature of who God is. It's limited. And that is in classical Islam, and that is in Christianity, because for Christianity, revelation is higher than reason. It's not saying we can't use reason or reason's not important, but it's a handmaiden to revelation. And that is also the same in Islam. And he misunderstood that, he misrepresented that, and because he wasn't engaging intellectually with me, because he was arrogant and thought he knew his topic, he didn't really understand where I was coming from. But actually, I think the person who was the mod knew where I was going, because he would have seen the debate I had at Speaker's Corner recently. And they knew that I would have I did corner the guy. The guy stated in the middle, someone should clip it. He did state that there are things incomprehensible about Allah, which makes my point, which he's contradicted himself. So I hope that's interesting. terms of the deity of Christ, I've done lots of videos on the deity of Christ. You can go and look into all that. I had verses to show about the deity of Christ and the Trinity and all that. But yeah, so the top and bottom of it, this guy is disingenuous, very disrespectful, and he couldn't actually engage intellectually with me. He kept strawmanning my position and strawmanning the Christian position, saying it's illogical when he's not really understanding what I'm actually saying. Those are my points, really. So I hope people have been edified by that. I'll put a link here if anybody wants to come on and comment on what I've said. I'll give you a few minutes and then I'll go. I'm still not well. I'm getting better. I'm getting a lot better. But I'm still not fully well. But I'm a lot better. So the link's there if anybody wants to come on and talk. Thanks a lot, bro. Much appreciated, mate. Thank you. Anybody want to come on? You're welcome to come on. So my advice is these people are disingenuous. I wouldn't go and talk to these guys. They're not sincere. They're not honest. And they can't have a proper intellectual discussion. Yeah. So the link's there if anybody wants to come on. And I'll just give a few minutes anybody wants to come on. So they're still, I don't know what they're saying at the moment.
Come to the religion of Islam.
Okay.
And I'll
attack Mohammed Hijab, the Zionist. Huh? £1 million they raised to take me to court against me with no win, no fee solicitor. Paying my own fees. The other guy, I'm taking him to court. I'm going myself, representing myself. He's raising £60,000 in a day. Yeah, because so they have more hate for Muhammad Hijab than you have love for Allah. Is that what it is? They have more hate. These guys, not even for the Prophet Muhammad. They have more hate for Muhammad Hijab more than you have love for Allah. Is that what it is? Can you imagine? Can you imagine that? Are you embarrassed? You should be embarrassed. You should be embarrassed. As haram.
Absolutely,
Wallah is wrong.
And the people are listening. They're donating, and their actual donations have been going up in all this time. And what we have to keep in mind is people are passionate. Muslim, Christian, whoever you are, any decent human.
They don't tell you what these monsters did to those Jews that they took on that terrible day. How they abused the women and stuck things in the women's private parts and cut people's things off. They don't tell you all that. So don't be donating to these guys because they'll just use it for themselves.
Being any civilized person is going to stand up to the people, stand up for the people of Lebanon so that they can survive this Zionist onslaught. Now we have our friend here, Jason, who is joining us. How are you doing, my friend?
It's not me.
We cannot hear you. You've muted yourself.
Yeah, I'm doing good.
Where are you calling in from?
From UK.
Okay, sure. What's your question?
No, I just wanted to know. I don't have a question. Just wanted to know about Islam.
Okay, sure. What's your background? Are you Muslim, Christian? What's your background?
Christian.
Sure. Okay. So what's your question?
He wants to know about Islam. Okay, Islam is about one God. We believe in one God, the God of Abraham, the God of Moses, the God of Jesus. We believe that there's one God that created the universe. It's not a triune God.
False prophet. Anyhow, I'm going to go, folks. Don't forget to support. They're on about supporting their cause. I'm trying to preach the gospel, trying to get the gospel out. I need a lot of encouragement and support. If you like my street preaching, if you go to Suckle Films, you can see my apologetic ministry there. They film me when I'm in. So if you want to see my apologetic ministry, I've been doing quite a while. They're not bothered. Well, hit me in the head.
Shut your mouth, because he's on the. He's a. I should say he's got mental health issues. He gets on top of that fence and he starts kicking people in their faces.
Yeah. Well, what it was, we were stood there. We didn't even know what happened. He just came behind us quickly.
Okay.
Started kicking and punching. We didn't even know what happened. They just came behind and started punching and kicking.
Wow.
So by the time,
Is he a Christian?
no, this guy is a Muslim. He's a Muslim. He's a Muslim. We didn't even know. He just jumped behind us quick. If we'd known he had mental issues, we'd have walked away. But we didn't know. And we were attacked. And all these Muslims here are doing this. That tells you if patriots don't wake up, our country's finished.
Finito.
We are helping you here.
I'm a Muslim.
But then see them what they're doing. We are helping you.
Did he attack you? Your injury.
Well, two of us are going to press charges.
Yes, I'm aware of
Okay.
You know the Indian, every week they come, Rasul, and now when he come, you know, and that's nothing enough.
They told me to wait over there, no police there, and I've had to go to them, and they said, "Oh, we'll take your details," but they're not making any effort to take the details. And the guy who attacked us is an Islamic extremist. He's an Islamic extremist.
At you or your family, the ganja.
We have
It's happening. I was stood there, and suddenly I get smacked in the face. Then I turn round, and I'm looking. If it was homophobic, they'd have taken details, and that'd have been it in minutes. If it had been an Islamophobia issue, the guy would have been arrested, and they would have taken notes straight away. But because it's me, and you should have been. If it had been any other Islamophobia, gay phobia, whatever, you'd have been there in 2 minutes and taken details. But you're not even bothered about it. You're not bothered about it. He assaulted me. He hit me twice, and he did no. So,
mafia. I'm a mafia.
Is
Why
English
is it
law
a criminal? We don't touch him. Nobody touch him.
Nobody likes Sharia law, bro.
No, don't.
so you can look at the work that I've done at Speaker's Corner. So there we are. Anyway, I'm going to go. Take care. I'm feeling a bit better, so God is good. Love you all. Take care. And watch the space. God bless you and take care. Love to everybody. Thank you for all coming.